You are witnessing an event so extraordinary that it will likely be studied in history books for decades. Stop and let that sink in. The magnitude of what just happened cannot be overstated. When in modern memory has a former royal, someone who once walked the hallowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, who sat in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II, who swore sacred vows before a global audience of millions, been literally turned away at an international border. This is not a simple tabloid story or the latest viral celebrity scandal. No, this is a geopolitical declaration wrapped in humiliation and precision. It is a loud, crystal clear, and unflinching statement from one of the most powerful and wealthiest regions on Earth. Dubai, the glittering city of luxury and ambition, was meant to be the ultimate refuge, a place where influence and wealth could shield you from scrutiny. But instead of a welcome fit for a duchess, there was a red light, a hard stop, and an unmistakable denial. Sources close to the matter reveal that the woman who once captivated the globe was trapped in what can only be described as a diplomatic limbo. Hours stretched on in a sterile, private holding area. Tents of temporary authority shielding her from the public eye, yet also amplifying the quiet, humiliating isolation. She arrived expecting to glide through the airport's diplomatic channels on the sheer power of her name and her reputation. But Dubai reminded her, history matters more than PR spin. Yet the true story lies not in the denial itself. It lies in the terrifying reasoning behind it. Why would a city that practically rolls out the gold carpet for billionaires, influencers, and celebrities suddenly shut the gates on one woman? Insiders suggest the answer was far from spontaneous. It was a meticulously calculated move by the Emirati government, a gesture grounded in respect for centuries-old traditions and shadow diplomacy that reportedly involved communication with the highest echelons of the British establishment itself. Do not mistake this as a simple border issue. We are about to dive into hidden forces, secret files, and one pivotal phone call that changed everything. The world, in one quiet yet resounding statement, has just said no. And Dubai, the city of gleaming towers and limitless ambition, has just reminded the world that not even global celebrity is untouchable. Dubai is a city where the impossible seems routine. Glass towers pierce the sky, luxury cars glide along pristine boulevards, and billionaires store their fortunes like jewels in modern-day fortresses. It is a stage for those who crave visibility yet demand discretion. Influencers parade perfection, curated for social media, a life crafted to be flawless. For Meghan Markle, this city was meant to be the ultimate escape hatch, a sanctuary far from London's grey skies and California's hostile climate, a chance to reclaim a gilded place on the world stage. But there is a crucial truth about the United Arab Emirates. They do not allow anyone entry simply because of fame, especially not someone with a controversial track record that stretches like a comet across the sky. According to multiple sources with insight into airport security operations, Meghan approached the Dubai border fully expecting to be ushered through the diplomatic lane. She was a Duchess of Sussex, a Netflix star, a confidant to some of the most powerful media moguls in the United States. The doors of the world, she assumed, should swing open at the mere mention of her name. Instead, she faced a wall, polite, unyielding, and carefully controlled. Border officials flagged her file immediately. This was no ordinary immigration check. It was a premeditated pause, a deliberate decision to stop, scrutinize, and evaluate her presence. She was not arrested, but she was detained, a distinction that makes the humiliation sharper, the tension palpable. For hours, the woman who once sat beside the Queen was confined to a private questioning suite. Imagine the sudden shift in atmosphere. One moment, you are the leading character of your own life story. The next, your status means nothing. You are now answering questions to officials who are unimpressed by fame, rank, or reputation. Insiders describe a tense, quiet, and deeply humiliating scene. Time dripped slowly as the reality of a crumbling plan hit. The grand vision of a luxurious escape was unraveling in real time, and the question echoed, why did Dubai say no? To answer this, one must understand Emirati diplomacy, a system vastly different from Western reliance on PR teams and social media spin. In the Middle East, decisions are rooted in history, strategic alliances, and long-term stability. Dubai's leaders have spent decades cultivating an image that attracts the world's elite. They have created a safe haven for capital, power, and prestige, and they guard that reputation with vigilance that outsiders often underestimate. When officials examined her file, they didn't see a victim or revolutionary, they saw a liability. First and foremost, the unbreakable ties between the UAE and the United Kingdom cannot be overstated. These are not casual partnerships. They are multi-billion-dollar trade relationships, vital diplomatic alliances, and security agreements maintained over generations. The Gulf's ruling families have a near-spiritual reverence for monarchy. Public attacks on the British Crown were not interpreted as acts of bravery. They were seen as fundamental breaches of loyalty. Dubai's decision-makers were unwilling to harbour someone who was, in essence, at war with the very institution they respect above all else. But this goes beyond diplomacy. It is about pattern recognition. In high-stakes security, actions speak louder than words. Meghan's path was impossible to ignore. Allegations of bullying staff in London, business partners in the United States distancing themselves, multi-million-dollar projects crumbling under creative disagreements. Everywhere she went, drama followed. Officials in Dubai, experts at risk assessment, observed lawsuits stacking up across continents. They saw leaked complaints from former employees, disputes unresolved, and a consistent pattern of conflict surrounding her presence. As the Middle Eastern saying goes, if one person tells you you are a horse, ignore them. If two tell you, start checking for a saddle. If dozens across continents tell the same story, it's time to reconsider your strategy. For Dubai, the solution was clear. Close the door before chaos arrives. The implications are staggering. Dubai, a city priding itself on openness, found her presence a reputational risk too high to ignore. The Netflix series, viewed by decision-makers as a multi-million-dollar score-settling operation. The Oprah interview? Explosive allegations made without verification. This wasn't empowerment, this was volatility. After hours of waiting, the verdict arrived. Firm, polite, unappealable. Turn around. Leave. No exceptions. The exit strategy she had imagined as a grand rebirth became a quiet, stinging retreat. Boarding her flight, the scope of her isolation began to crystallize. This was no mere travel hiccup. It was the first clear sign that the global elite were closing ranks. And if Dubai's rejection was a shock, Saudi Arabia was about to deliver a catastrophic blow. The walls weren't just closing in, they were being fortified with iron. Meghan, known for always having a plan B, now faced a scenario where even her backup plan would test her status, her resources, and her influence. The Dubai door slammed shut, and her team pivoted to the House of Saud. But this wasn't a casual tourism application. This was a desperate bid for sanctuary, a high-stakes attempt to secure luxury, protection, and invisibility from Western scrutiny. For weeks, sources reveal her team engaged in behind-the-scenes negotiations with officials close to the Saudi royal family, crafting a calculated and ambitious approach. This was a pursuit of prestige and safety, the protection afforded to those deemed worthy guests of one of the world's wealthiest, most powerful royal houses. Yet here, the story takes a chilling turn. Saudi decision-makers do not operate on Hollywood metrics. Netflix statistics, Instagram aesthetics, or media influence mean nothing. In the kingdom, loyalty, tradition, and the sanctity of the family unit reign supreme. When her team approached the Saudis, they didn't simply say no, they conducted a deep and exhaustive review of her history, tracing every move since she entered the British royal family in 2016. The rejection that came next wasn't just fast. It was blistering, decisive, and bone-chilling. It hit with a force that left insiders shaken, and the message carried a weight few had ever imagined. Sources reveal that a senior Saudi official delivered the response with an icy detachment that left no room for negotiation. There were no paperwork errors to blame, no minor bureaucratic hiccups to gloss over. Instead, they used a phrase in diplomatic circles considered the ultimate kiss of death: unacceptable reputational risk. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. Reputational risk. In the world of high-stakes global politics, that's not a casual term. It's a neon warning sign, a polite yet merciless way of saying, Your presence is a liability we refuse to carry. But the real kicker, the line that reportedly reverberated through the corridors of power, is one that insiders have whispered about for months. One source, speaking under strict anonymity, claimed a senior official delivered the chilling verdict with perfect calm. "We respect royalty. We do not host people who disrespect theirs." Boom. There it is. The nail driven straight into the coffin, ice cold and undeniable. This wasn't merely a comment about Meghan Markle as an individual, it was a collective statement from the monarchies of the East. The message was clear: the rules of loyalty, discretion, and honour are absolute, and anyone daring to disregard them will face consequences. The institution of monarchy is not a costume one wears or discards for convenience. It is a sacred trust, forged over 1,000 years, demanding loyalty, discretion, and respect. In the eyes of Saudi decision-makers, Meghan was not a modernising force. They saw someone who had gone on global television to air family grievances for personal gain. They saw someone who leveraged royal privilege to negotiate multi-million-dollar deals while publicly criticising the very institution that had given her that power. And if she could do that to the House of Windsor, the family that welcomed her with open arms, honours and trust, what would stop her from repeating that behaviour elsewhere? The Saudis are masters of foresight. They examine history, patterns and consequences. They watched the Oprah interview, saw explosive allegations levelled without proof, and recognised the Netflix series as a public airing of private family matters for profit. Conflict, not harmony, seemed to follow her like a shadow. The second door slammed shut. Imagine the reality hitting her team. Two of the most powerful regions on the planet had deemed her unworthy. Dubai said no. Saudi Arabia said no. Glamour, fame, and wealth could not override the cold logic of reputation and loyalty. For the first time, it became painfully clear. This was a geopolitical rejection, stripped of all embellishment, leaving only stark isolation. Yet, there's an even darker layer. Why was the Saudi decision so coordinated? Rumours began swirling in London. Analysts with deep connections to diplomatic circles suggest it wasn't coincidence. It wasn't mere coincidence that two elite Gulf nations aligned against her. A quiet warning had reportedly passed through the Five Eyes intelligence network, quietly shared with key Gulf allies. Not a public decree, not a headline. Just a silent, carefully orchestrated heads-up about the Sussex movements and the potential complications they represented. And who was allegedly behind this diplomatic chess move? Prince William. Yes, the very brother who had once been Harry's closest ally. According to multiple reports, William, the future king, understood better than anyone that the stability of the monarchy depends on mutual respect, discretion, and the careful management of perception. If Meghan was plotting a shadow court in the Middle East, William ensured the world knew the facts, the unvarnished truth. His team reportedly compiled a comprehensive dossier detailing bullying allegations from staff, leaked emails, legal battles, and testimony from those who felt exploited by her public narrative. This wasn't rumour or gossip. This was a meticulously assembled record of behaviour, incidents, and consequences, stretching back to 2016. When the Saudis reviewed the dossier, it wasn't simply a file. They saw a blueprint for risk. Loyalty, discretion, and honour are non-negotiable in Middle Eastern royalty, and the evidence painted a woman willing to betray familial trust for personal gain. The conclusion was inevitable. Hosting her was too dangerous, too volatile, and too unpredictable. Meghan Markle, for the first time, found herself a woman without a country, a duchess without a court, a celebrity without sanctuary. The Saudi rejection sent a clear lesson to the world. You cannot burn down your own house and expect your neighbours to hand you the keys to theirs. Absolute, final, non-negotiable. As Meghan scrambled to devise a plan C, the fragile world she had meticulously constructed began to crumble, and insiders suggest her frustration was white-hot. In the realm of Middle Eastern elites, respect is not optional. It is a requirement. One misstep may be forgiven, two missteps are a verdict. The eyes of the world were watching, and for the first time, Meghan Markle was truly out of options. Now, let's turn to the man quietly orchestrating this invisible wall, Prince William. For decades, the public has seen him as the calm, stoic brother, the one carrying the weight of the crown with measured dignity. While Harry and Meghan dominated headlines with grievances, the future king's patience quietly reached its limit. Sources close to the palace say William privately described Meghan not as a difficult relative, but as a master manipulator, someone whose strategy revolves around shifting blame, stirring drama, and keeping herself at the centre of every story, regardless of cost to the institution he is destined to protect. And when you examine the evidence circulating through diplomatic channels, it's hard to dispute that assessment. Think about the trajectory of recent years, explosive interviews, celebrity friendships that vanish overnight, a failed podcast, a lifestyle brand that barely exists, relentless legal battles. It is noise. Constant, relentless, exhausting noise. William, who will one day sit on the throne, decided that this noise could not drown out the stability of the monarchy. So when diplomatic channels opened, when Saudi and Emirati advisors inquired about the woman knocking on their doors, William's team reportedly ensured the full picture was shared. Not rumours, not tabloid speculation, raw, documented facts, a dossier chronicling behaviour, disputes, allegations, and the timeline of public attacks on the royal family, contrasted against her ongoing use of royal privileges bestowed upon her by the very family she criticised. The Saudi authorities, reviewing this dossier, were reportedly stunned. Loyalty is a non-negotiable rule in their culture. If someone betrays their own blood for a Netflix deal, how could they ever be trusted with the secrets or sanctity of another royal court? William's quiet strike back was surgical. No TV appearances, no media battles, just letting the facts speak through proper elite channels. This represents a shift in royal strategy. The old mantra, never complain, never explain, evolved into precision protection of the institution. William saw patterns that were radioactive and decided, if Meghan wants independence, she would get it entirely, without any shadow of protection the family had provided. And when the Saudis looked at the dossier and said no, it validated William's strategy perfectly. In international diplomacy, patterns outweigh PR campaigns. You can hire the best publicists, craft perfect Instagram aesthetics, and give multiple interviews, but you cannot erase a documented history of conflict. William knew this. He waited, observed, and allowed the facts to speak. As the reality of this William-orchestrated warning filtered back to Meghan's camp, the reaction, insiders say, was nothing short of explosive. The bitter truth finally hit her like a thunderclap. Her plan B had been completely dismantled by the very man she had spent years manoeuvring against, undermining at every opportunity and trying to outshine in every arena. The irony was harsh, jagged, and inescapable. She had spent years believing she could outwit, outmaneuver, and ultimately outshine an institution whose roots stretch back over a millennium. And yet, here she was, forced to confront the reality that this ancient institution, with all its history, protocol, and experience, had teeth, and those teeth were now being shown by the one person she had underestimated most, the brother who had finally reached the limit of his patience. The stage was now set for the most intense period of rage, desperation, and internal turmoil ever witnessed from the Sussex camp. The walls of their Californian dream home, which had once represented freedom and independence, now felt more like a gilded cage, closing in with every passing day. The fantasy of American royalty was rapidly dissolving into a nightmare of mounting debt, shrinking influence, and social isolation. Shift your attention to the sun-drenched hills of California, where the couple had hoped to craft their new reality. For years, the sprawling Montecito estate was more than a home. It was a fortress of defiance, designed to be the ultimate symbol of independence. This mansion, with its sprawling gardens, luxurious amenities, and breathtaking views, was meant to send a statement to the world. We do not need the crown. We are our own sovereigns. But the reality emerging from exclusive Santa Barbara circles paints a very different picture. The walls of that $14 million sanctuary are starting to feel like walls closing in rather than opening possibilities. The financial reality of maintaining such an estate is staggering. A lifestyle that includes 24-hour security teams, multiple luxury vehicles, staff accommodations, sprawling gardens, and a mansion with 9 bedrooms and 16 bathrooms requires a constant, uninterrupted influx of capital. Initially, this seemed easily manageable. When the Sussexes arrived in 2020, their coffers were bolstered by hundreds of millions in streaming contracts, book advances, and lucrative media deals. But over the past several years, that financial landscape has dramatically shifted. The Spotify deal, once touted as groundbreaking, ended in humiliation, with one executive reportedly branding them grifters. The Netflix partnership, which was celebrated as a revolutionary foray into content creation, has produced far more headlines than actual hits. As revenue streams evaporate, the cost of maintaining the Montecito estate has become a relentless burden. Sources suggest the Sussexes are now navigating what insiders call a downsizing crisis, with growing whispers that Montecito may no longer even be their primary residence. Discussions are reportedly underway to offload the property before the financial floor collapses entirely beneath them. Imagine the psychological shock of transitioning from centuries-old wealth and prestige as a Duchess of Cornwall to a reality where every morning begins with scrutinizing balance sheets, calculating expenses, and planning financial contingencies. For Meghan, whose identity has been constructed around high-value living, influence, and prestige, this is far more than a financial setback. It is an existential threat. But the crisis extends beyond money. It concerns social currency, the measure of power in Hollywood, where influence is dictated not by wealth alone, but by who responds to your calls, who shows up to your events, and who validates your presence through association. When the Sussexes first landed in America, they were the hottest ticket in town, attending events with billionaires, tech moguls, and Hollywood elite. But the current guest list tells a different story. Influential players who once supported or championed the couple, people whose own reputations demanded careful alliances, have quietly retreated. Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, the Clooneys, once prominent figures in the Sussex social network, are now conspicuously absent. In the unforgiving world of Hollywood, drama without profit is fatal. The lifestyle brand that was intended to be Meghan's grand comeback, American Riviera Orchard, has so far yielded little beyond a few artisanal strawberry jam jars, distributed sparingly to select influencers. Critics dismiss it as a ghost brand, a desperate attempt to maintain relevance while lacking the infrastructure to sustain it. This is the Montecito meltdown in real time. The couple who once had the world at their feet now finds themselves increasingly isolated in a community that values winners and discards those who falter without hesitation. For those perceived as fading stars, the psychological toll is immense. Sources describe an atmosphere of high tension and constant vigilance, with the couple living in a perpetual state of spin, attempting to manage narratives while the media industry increasingly smells vulnerability. Outlets that once functioned as mouthpieces now publish critical op-eds and fact-checks, exposing contradictions, failures, and the widening gap between narrative and reality. The sympathy that had once been their primary weapon has reached its expiration date. As financial safety nets erode and social influence diminishes, the California dream increasingly appears less like freedom and more like a very expensive mistake. The protective bubble they relied upon has burst. For the first time, Meghan is forced to confront the reality that the world she attempted to conquer continues to operate without her, indifferent to fame, royal titles, or media attention. Consider the pattern: storms following her across continents. When a storm hits once, it may be a tragedy. When it follows you from the palaces of London to the sleek suburbs of Vancouver, from celebrity enclaves in Montecito to the fortified borders of the United Arab Emirates, it ceases to be random. It becomes an inescapable climate of consequence. To truly understand why Dubai and Saudi Arabia closed their doors, one must examine the psychological and behavioral blueprint that analysts now call the common denominator in every controversy, every fractured partnership, and every conflict over the last decade. Middle Eastern royal families, Global business elites and international gatekeepers alike have observed a pattern: volatility, drama, and repeated conflicts leaving chaos and tension in their wake. They recognize a constant element in these repeated failures, a signal that transcends press releases, media spin, and personal narratives. This is the red flag that cannot be ignored. History is being written before our eyes. Pause for a moment and let this sink in. When was the last time in modern history that a former royal, someone who had walked the hallowed halls of Buckingham Palace, stood in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II and taken sacred vows before a global audience of millions, was physically turned away at an international border? This is not a tabloid exaggeration or fleeting celebrity scandal. What we are witnessing is a geopolitical rejection of the highest order. The message sent by Dubai was both clear and brutal. The red carpet was replaced with a red light. According to multiple insiders, the woman who once commanded the world's attention was held for several tense and humiliating hours in a private suite, a liminal space between acceptance and rejection. She expected that her name, fame, and royal history would be sufficient to secure entry, only to discover that in the City of Gold, reputation and history outweigh PR campaigns and media narratives. The real story is not merely that she was told to leave, it is the terrifying why behind the decision. Why would a nation that welcomes every billionaire, influencer, and celebrity suddenly refuse entry to one person? The answer, insiders say, is a calculated move by the Emirati government, rooted in deep respect for ancient traditions and reinforced by silent warnings circulated through the corridors of international diplomacy. According to sources, this warning allegedly originated from the highest levels of the British establishment itself. This was not about paperwork or administrative error, it was about influence, precedent, and the potential ripple effects of allowing someone with a history of controversy, lawsuits, and public attacks on royal institutions into their territory. If you think this story ends with a simple travel dispute, you have not been paying attention. We are about to uncover the hidden forces, secret dossiers, and the single phone call that changed everything. Welcome to the new reality. The world has said unequivocally no. Look closer at Dubai, the city of ambition, where billionaires park their wealth in towers that pierce the clouds, where influencers manufacture perfect lives, and where luxury is currency. This was meant to be Meghan's sanctuary, her escape from the constant scrutiny of Western tabloids. It was meant to allow her a reinvention, far from London's grey skies and California's increasingly hostile atmosphere. But in the UAE, wealth and fame alone do not guarantee safety or entry, especially for those whose past behaviour signals volatility. Upon arrival, Meghan expected a diplomatic lane, an effortless passage befitting a duchess, media star, and confidant of some of the most powerful figures in American media. Instead, she encountered polite but immovable resistance. Her file was flagged immediately, signalling that this was no routine border check, but a deliberate, premeditated evaluation. She was not arrested, to be clear, but she was detained. For several hours, the woman who had once sat beside the Queen was asked to justify her presence to officials, wholly unimpressed by celebrity or prior status, forced to reckon with the stark reality that in the world of high-stakes international diplomacy, history and behaviour outweigh fame and PR campaigns. One moment, she was the protagonist of her glamorous narrative. The next, she faced a room full of quiet, calculating officials who were unflinching, deliberate, and unimpressed, forcing her to confront the consequences of decades of choices and actions on a global scale. Insiders described the scene as tense, quiet, and deeply humiliating as the minutes turned into hours. The atmosphere in that private suite at Dubai International Airport was electric, but not in a glamorous way. It was heavy with anticipation, anxiety, and the silent judgment of those who held real authority. Every glance, every pause, every subtle gesture seemed magnified, signaling the enormity of what was unfolding. Slowly, the realization began to dawn. The meticulously orchestrated plan, the one crafted over months with endless resources and expert advisors, was collapsing in the most public, excruciatingly painful way possible. So why did Dubai say no? To understand, we need to step back and examine the way power operates in the United Arab Emirates. Unlike Western nations, where reputation management can often be outsourced to PR firms, social media experts, and celebrity branding teams, the Middle East functions on a foundation of centuries-old traditions, alliances, and strategic foresight. The rulers of Dubai, particularly the royal family and their advisors, have spent decades carefully building a global brand, an empire of influence, wealth, and credibility. This city is a sanctuary for capital, a hub for the world's most powerful, and it thrives because the ruling families protect it with unyielding vigilance. Outsiders often underestimate this resolve, assuming fame, money, or Western celebrity status can override protocol. When officials in Dubai reviewed the file of the woman standing before them, they did not see a celebrity, a former royal, or a victim of circumstance. What they saw was a liability, someone whose presence carried risk. And that risk was measured not in hours or days, but across decades of precedent. The ties between the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom are deep, intricate, and vital. Multi-billion-dollar trade deals, critical security collaborations, shared intelligence, and a history of mutual diplomatic trust spanning generations. The Emirati leadership was not about to jeopardize this delicate network for one high-profile visitor whose track record suggested disruption rather than discretion. Moreover, the ruling families of the Gulf hold monarchy in almost spiritual reverence. Royalty, in their world, is a custodial responsibility, a sacred inheritance. It is not a prop to be wielded for personal gain or public attention. The public critiques of the British Crown, broadcast globally, were interpreted not as acts of courage, but as a profound violation of loyalty and trust. Dubai's leaders had no interest in harbouring someone perceived as actively at odds with the very institution they revered. Yet the reasoning went even deeper. Analysts refer to this principle as pattern recognition, the method of assessing behaviour over time to predict future outcomes. In high-stakes diplomatic and security environments, actions speak louder than words. Meghan Markle's patterns, as they appeared on paper, were impossible to ignore. Allegations of staff bullying in London, partners in the US distancing themselves, multi-million-dollar ventures collapsing under creative disputes, all painted a consistent picture of disruption. The officials in Dubai saw lawsuits, leaked complaints, and public controversies piling up across continents. They saw a common denominator, a figure at the center of repeated turbulence. There's a local saying in the Middle East: if one person tells you that you are a horse, ignore them. If two people tell you, start looking for a saddle. When dozens across continents echo the same warning, it is time to act decisively. This was precisely the lens through which Dubai viewed Meghan Markle. To their leadership, closing the door was not punitive. It was practical, preemptive, and essential for protecting national and dynastic interests. Consider the message being sent. Dubai, often regarded as one of the most open cosmopolitan cities on earth, had just deemed one individual an unacceptable reputational risk. In diplomatic parlance, this is the ultimate declaration: we will not allow your problems to become our problems. The decision was informed by a careful review of her Netflix documentary series, widely interpreted in the region as a multi-million-dollar personal vendetta, and the Oprah interview, where explosive allegations were made without evidence. For the decision-makers in the City of Gold, these were not acts of empowerment, they were red flags of volatility. After several agonizing hours, the verdict arrived, polite, firm, and absolute. She was told to turn around and leave. No exceptions, no appeals, no negotiating her way in. The carefully planned entrance meant to showcase a rebirth instead became a quiet retreat, marked by dignity stripped away in real time. Boarding a flight out, the stark reality of her isolation began to crystallize. This was no mere travel inconvenience. It was a symbolic closing of doors at the highest level, a warning that the global elite were beginning to consolidate and protect their inner circles. But if the rejection from Dubai was shocking, what awaited in Saudi Arabia was catastrophic. Here, the walls were not simply closing. They were being reinforced with steel and stone, unyielding and absolute. The Saudi decision was not about red tape, visas, or protocol. It was a strategic, deliberate act of long-term risk management, a move that would echo through international power corridors. Known for always having a plan B, Meghan immediately pivoted towards the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But what her team sought was far beyond tourism. They were seeking a sanctuary, the prestige and protection of one of the wealthiest and most powerful royal families on earth. Weeks of behind-the-scenes negotiations reportedly ensued with advisors close to the royal family, all aimed at creating a secure haven for her life in luxury, shielded from media scrutiny and the hostility she claimed existed in California. The Saudis, however, do not operate on Hollywood rules. Loyalty, tradition, and family sanctity guide their decision-making. When Meghan's inquiry reached their attention, it triggered a deep and comprehensive review of her history since joining the British royal family in 2016. Every interview, public statement, lawsuit, partnership, and media appearance was evaluated. Allegations of workplace bullying, conflicts with staff, public complaints, and the highly publicised Netflix and Oprah productions were all considered. The rejection that followed was swift, decisive, and ice-cold. According to insiders, a senior Saudi official delivered the verdict with such deliberate calm that the message could not have been clearer. She was a reputational risk. No administrative delays, no minor errors. This was the ultimate diplomatic red flag. One insider revealed a quote that has quietly circulated among diplomatic circles. "We respect royalty. We do not host people who disrespect theirs." Boom. There it was. Absolute. Final. The nail in the coffin. This was not about Meghan as an individual. It was a statement from the monarchies of the East. Monarchy is not a costume worn at will. It is a sacred trust, demanding loyalty and discretion. Meghan was seen not as a reformer, but as someone who had publicly attacked the very institution that had elevated her, leveraged her royal status for personal gain, and demonstrated a pattern of conflict. If she could do this to the House of Windsor, what would stop her from doing the same to other royal houses? The doors of Dubai and Saudi Arabia had been firmly shut. For the first time, the global elite sent a message that titles, celebrity, and fame mean nothing without trust, discretion, and loyalty. For Meghan Markle, the scope of her global isolation had become undeniably real. The carefully constructed narrative of power, influence, and prestige suddenly collided with the unyielding reality of international norms and royal respect. And this, friends, is why the world is watching, not because of celebrity gossip, but because history has rarely seen a former royal, a woman who once walked the halls of Buckingham Palace, sit beside the Queen, and then be physically turned away at the borders of two of the wealthiest and most powerful regions on the planet. This is a geopolitical rebuke of the highest order, a lesson in the unassailable authority of tradition, loyalty, and pattern recognition. If you've been following this story, it's a stark reminder that in a world ruled by legacy, power, and prestige, no one can outrun history, and no amount of fame can replace trust. So, take a moment to reflect, share your thoughts, and if you want to stay updated on the unfolding story of the Sussex, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next chapter is already in motion, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.